Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to LangBytes again. This is your podcast about computational linguistics. And today we have the pleasure to talk to Micaela Bester. Micaela studied linguistics with a focus on phonetics, sociolinguistics, and language variation and change. She worked as a translator and a teacher for a few years before transitioning to text-to-speech technology in 2015 at Google. So she worked at Google on the first Australian English assistant voice. Then she moved on to text classification for ads. And after working at Google, she briefly worked with some African languages at a text-to-speech startup. And now she has been managing the speech technology program at PTW since 2019. So again, thank you, Michaela, for coming. And I hope you like our chat here.
Thank you for having me, João.
All right. So as our viewers know, we have a random question, which is a little bit personal. Um, and your question is, what superpower would you like to have?
Flying, easy. I would want to fly. I think it would be a really cool sensation. And also you would be able to just get around much more quickly and easily, which would be great, frankly. You don't have to commute anymore. You can just like zip across the rooftops. I think that would be very cool.
Yeah. And then traveling will be cheaper as well.
Much cheaper, obviously, and more comfortable. You don't have to sit in a plane and
yeah,
all that.
Less hours probably. That's nice. Yeah, that's a good superpower to have. So thank you for that. And now we are going to move on to the career questions. And again, these questions are just a guide. Maybe we can get off of them a little bit, but that's okay. So the first question is, can you provide an overview of your path in linguistics from university to your first job in the tech industry? And then how did you find out about the text-to-speech opportunity?
Sure. So when I graduated from linguistics in Sydney from university, I didn't really know what jobs I could do, which I'm sure is a familiar feeling to many linguistics graduates, especially back in whenever that was, 2012, when I graduated. There really weren't many jobs open to linguists. So the kind of main options were either academia, research and education, or I knew a lot of people who went into speech pathology, like speech therapy, or dialect and accent coaching for actors and things like that. So yeah, I was at a bit of a loss. So as you mentioned in the bio, I just sort of went into translation for a bit because I spoke Italian, so I got a translator accreditation in Italian, moved to Italy and did some freelance work, translating and also teaching English. And so it was kind of, I'd never heard of text-to-speech. Language technology was a very new field, I think, at the time. But there's this great website called Linguists. And I heard about that website through my university, and I was just sort of browsing jobs one day, and I came across what sounded like the dream job, looking for basically phoneticians and phonologists who were also native speakers of Australian English. And I was like, what job could possibly require these two things? But, I interviewed for that job and I got it, and it turned out to be a text-to-speech job. And during the interview, I remember speaking to the program manager and saying, I don't know what TTS is. Like, what are we going to be doing on this job? And that's when I discovered that, you know, we're actually surrounded by TTS all the time. We just don't realize it. You know, whether it's announcements at train stations or, you know, Google Maps speaking directions to you or anything like that. Or, you know, famously when you call a call center and you get sort of an automated message.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, that could be interesting and exciting to work on. And I wasn't very happy teaching or translating. So, so I moved to London for that. And that was 8 years ago. So it was sort of accidental, really, discovering TTS and speech technology. But yeah, I'm so glad I did because, you know, sort of similar story. When I discovered linguistics as a field of study at university, that was also a revelation, you know, because you don't really hear about it when you're at school and people say, what are you going to study at uni? No one says linguistics because no one knows what it is really. So yeah, discovering that was really nice.
That's cool. That's very cool. So you entered the Australian English opportunity as an intern or already as full time?
I was a temporary contract worker at Google
Okay.
for that project because it was a short-term project.
Mhm.
But after that was completed, I moved around to a few different linguistics teams within Google. So from speech, I moved on to more sort of the NLG part of the pipeline. So that was generating the messages that the assistant would then have to pronounce. So kind of stepping back one stage in the pipeline. And so that was interesting as well. And then a little bit of natural language understanding to speech recognition and understanding users' intents when they ask questions of the assistant. So I kind of explored a few different kind of things that you can do with linguistics. And then moving away from speech entirely, I went full-time at Google in Dublin and was working on text classification. And so that was kind of creating taxonomies and also, you know, protecting brands from being advertised on websites that contain like swear words in different languages, so being able to detect swear words, which was all really interesting because it was quite new for me. But I definitely missed speech, I have to say. My heart wasn't in the text classification world. It was in the accents and dialects world. So that's why I moved back to London. I also missed London. I moved back and found the African languages startup and got to work on TTS again. And that was a much better fit.
Yeah. As a sociolinguist, I imagine that you missed speech, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's usually what we work on.
Yeah, and I think there is a place for linguists in the advertising space and in, you know, ontologies and taxonomies and classifications. But it's definitely a branch of linguistics that I wasn't as passionate about. I think it gets more into the syntax and semantics world. So, and, you know, and also just, it's similar to speech in that we still need to collect loads of data and annotate the data and process the data and analyze the data. But instead of audio data, it was just all text. And I definitely missed the audio side of things.
I agree. So thinking about your journey so far from the first opportunity that you had, and now your current job, what are the key skills and qualities and maybe even qualifications that a linguist should possess in order to excel in the field? And could you provide some examples of how you have applied these skills in your previous projects or current projects?
Yeah, so I think with linguistics in this field, there's sort of two main paths you can take
Mhm,
in your career. And they're quite separate, I think, which is maybe a shame, but there's sort of the technical path and the management route.
mhm,
So, but I do find that, for example, if you go down the project management route like I did and the people management route, it's still very helpful to know some of the technical things
yeah,
and vice versa. So what I would suggest is things like, on the technical side, I think the most useful skills would be Python is
mhm,
probably the best language for language related stuff. And there's also, I think just data processing and data analysis has been really useful as well, particularly using Excel or Google Sheets,
mhm,
because, you know, we just work with such large corpora. And so I think knowing how to, for example, take two corpora and find the differences between them, you know, things like that can be really useful, which you could do either in kind of Excel and Sheets or using a simple Python script.
mhm,
And then in terms of project management, I would say it's just really sort of basic techniques like project life cycles, you know, Gantt charts, milestones, and really what any sort of what a project manager would do in any field, not just in the linguistics field.
mhm,
Things like time management, you know, I think that those are skills that sometimes we don't think about, but they're actually really useful, both for the sort of career path that I took within speech technology, but also even for people who are working on the more technical side of things.
mhm.
I think they still need to know how to manage their own projects and their own time, right? So
Yeah.
I think those are probably all the key
Mhm.
skills.
And have you taken any course related to people and project management, or with your experience managing your own projects, you were able to do the work?
Definitely a bit of both. I think experience has been more useful than the courses,
Mhm,
but there are some really great courses on LinkedIn Learning, and for, to do with everything around project management, from managing people, managing different personalities in a team, through to sort of the finance and budget and revenue kind of stuff.
mhm,
So that's helpful. And also, I mean, I think this probably goes without saying, but going back to your question about key skills, I think it is really important, even if you're like really good at coding or really good at project management, not to lose sight of your actual linguistic skills as well, right? So if you want to work in speech tech, like I do, then I think maintaining an interest in phonetics and phonology is really important, maybe a bit of morphology as well. Whereas if you wanted to go into a different kind of computational linguistics field, like, you know, into the kind of text classification stuff that I was talking about before that I used to do, then you might want to focus more on syntax and semantics, right?
mhm.
But yeah, we shouldn't lose sight of that, like that
Yeah,
we're
I agree.
still linguists, you know. We might be doing a bit of coding and a bit of management, but we're still linguists.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even because we graduated in linguistics, so we still linguists and we must use, I mean, if you like it, what you studied, then you should apply it to your work. So
Exactly.
great. And you started talking about the general possibilities for linguists in tech industry. So can you give a little bit more details about that? Maybe you can focus a little bit more on the management part because we already had other guests about tech talking about the technical part, but I think you're the first one talking about the management path.
Yeah, sure. So I think there is, thankfully, like compared with when I started out 8 years ago, there is a lot more, this field is a lot bigger now, thankfully. There's a lot more
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for linguists. And so I've noticed that one of the big fields at the moment seems to be conversational design and chatbots. Chatbots are becoming a real thing, and so they do need linguists in those spaces. And really anything. This is another skill that I would add to the list is I think machine learning is really important at the moment. You know, back in the day, we used to write really manual rules about how to pronounce certain graphemes, for example, whereas now we just train a model on huge amounts of data and it learns by itself. So I think knowing how to interact with machine learning is also important. And that really does open up lots of job opportunities, I think. So, I mean, and there's still other traditional jobs in academia and in speech coaching and things like that. But yeah, thankfully, I think there's a lot more opportunities in the tech space now as well. So yeah, so in terms of project management, I mean, you've got what I do, which is basically managing teams of linguists who annotate data and curate data, but also the data collection side of things, right? Finding the voice actors that we need and, you know, setting up this recording studios. I mean, all of that. Multiple people have to manage those projects in so many different languages. So
That's something I would like to ask you. In your experience, maybe at your company or you've seen in another companies, what are what is the protocol? Do they usually divide languages in groups? For example, the linguistic management for Romance languages or Germanic languages. What are the divisions there?
So no, in my experience, we don't usually divide by language groups like that in the speech technology space. So I believe, for example, although this isn't an area I know a huge amount about, but I think in, you know, translation project management, I think you might be more inclined to separate languages into groups like Romance versus, you know, whichever groups of languages we're talking about. Whereas what we do is sort of more based on really what the client needs or what the market wants. So at the moment, we might be focusing on, you know, getting those technologies out to communities further afield in Africa and India, as an example. So then we might do a whole batch of African languages at once and a whole batch of Indian languages at once. But those languages might be from vastly different language families as well, right? So for example, if we were doing Farsi, Persian, which is an Indo-European language, and we were also doing Arabic, you know, those two locales might be right next door to each other, but the languages are not, you know, not related at all. So it tends to maybe be divided more into geographical groups rather than language families, or it might just be that this client has decided they want the top 5 languages. So therefore we're going to be doing, you know, English, Spanish, Mandarin, French, Arabic,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, it really depends.
Yeah. And a question that just popped up. Previously, I have interviewed someone who likes games, and I asked them about what are the applications of NLP in games,
Mhm.
and they told us. Um, I would like to ask you, have you ever worked on a TTS project that would be for games, not only for voice assistants?
So I haven't personally, which is quite funny because my company PTW is a gaming company first and foremost. Most of their clients for localization and translation and even voice production are games,
Mhm.
but I have absolutely nothing to do with them.
Oh.
So I don't know whether that's because I don't know whether the gaming industry is still doing kind of traditional voiceover rather than TTS. But at the moment, our TTS clients and also in my previous companies have tended to be, you know, one of the big ones is like cars, like
Mm.
the automotive industry. But also, yeah, the big voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, um, and even just smaller ones, audiobooks as well. So there's quite a few applications.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. So now I would like to focus um on the African languages work that you did before. And I would like to ask you, how was it to work with African languages? Do you have any proficiency, or did you used to have any proficiency in any African language to work with it? And what type of tasks did you do? And if you applied linguistics in that particular role, and how?
So the African languages were really fun and interesting. I mean, I still work on them now in my current role, but the great thing about the startup I was at previously is that it was entirely devoted to African languages.
Mm,
So I felt like I really got to dive deeply into, you know, the different language families. Um, and I didn't apply any linguistics. The role was purely management. So the main tasks were, first of all, just trying to get the resources, because a lot of these languages are very low resource languages. You know, they might have huge populations, but there's not a lot of published
mm-hmm,
material, or, you know, so firstly trying to find contacts in those countries who could do voice recordings for us and also transcriptions was a real challenge. And just the day-to-day management, you know, getting the data in, quality checking the data and sending it off to be sort of to train the model really. So, but I don't have any proficiency in any African languages.
mm-hmm.
I have South African family and they can speak Afrikaans, if that counts as an African language, but I cannot.
Okay.
As you know, as a linguist, you don't have to speak a language to be able to work with it,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We still know how to research the structure of languages and how they work um, without being able to say a single word.
Yeah, especially at this type of job that is mainly management,
Yeah,
not you don't need to you didn't need to get in touch with the data itself, like analyze it. So there
yeah,
isn't much need for you to learn it.
but it would be fun to learn.
Yeah, I imagine. And now going to the present, you are working at PTW, and as you said, it is a more management driven role. So, and then now you just said that at this African languages startup, it was only management, no linguistics. Now, do you apply linguistics, your technical knowledge about linguistics, and how so? If yes, how so? And do you need coding to perform it?
So I do more linguistics now in the current role, which is great. Mostly so when we are setting up a new language, we will have to kind of help define the inventory of phonemes, help decide on the transcription conventions we're going to use, and just various kind of things to do with the phonology of each language. So that's great for me, because I did miss being able to do some linguistics, or at least, read some linguistics papers about a certain language. And I mean, we work with native speakers to do that, obviously, because I can't be trusted to do a phonemic inventory of like Zulu. So we do use native speakers, but yeah, it's great that I get to interact with that a little bit more. And also just in quality checking the work before delivering it, or even just assigning the work to the various linguists. It really helps in doing this job to know what the linguists are doing. Like if I were to send you a task, but not really understand the task myself, I think that would make it quite difficult for me to check whether you've done a good job. And also for troubleshooting, if one of our freelancers has a problem or a question, I need to be able to help them find the answer and figure it out, without just being a middleman who just passes messages back and forth between the client or the developer or whoever and the linguist. It helps for me to be able to, I wouldn't hire anyone to help me with this job if they didn't already know what a phoneme is, like, because I can't be explaining that, right? That's just, so we do a little bit more linguistics, and we don't need to do any coding, but I find that a little bit does help, and I mean a very little bit, because I am not a coder. But just really basic. I might, for example, write a tiny Python script to help me do my job more quickly, like to automate a process that I was doing manually with some data, right? Or again, formulas in Excel and Sheets are really, really useful. And just being able to do, to run diffs on various different files. And so a little bit goes a long way, I find.
And I would like to add another question about, let's say, the pipeline of your work. For example, you deal with linguists and they transcribe and they analyze data, they give back to you. And then do you also manage the developers that are going to take care of that data and put into the machine, or do you pass it down to the technical leader?
So usually once we receive the curated text and audio data and transcriptions and things, we hand all of that off to the client, and they deal with the modeling themselves.
Okay.
So our role is purely kind of the data collection and curation. And the client can do whatever they want with that data. So it's really just kind of sourcing the project, and then just getting really high quality speech data. And of course, a big part of it is also the phonemic transcriptions, right? Like that's where our linguists really come in. I think, if you could theoretically just collect a bunch of audio recordings and matching text and try and train a model on that. But I think there's a reason that, that our clients always seek out phonologists as well. And that is because clearly we add value. Teaching them the model explicitly how to pronounce, like how to convert graphemes into phonemes is an integral part of building like a high quality TTS voice. So I think that's the part that's most important in my opinion, but I'm biased.
Yeah, I agree. And now that you mentioned, now it just came a question to my mind about grapheme to phoneme. Have you seen any kind of progress related to text to speech, but with prosody?
Porosity is, in my opinion, the hardest part of this work. I think, you know, we're getting pretty, like the field is getting, the technology is getting really good with regard to pronunciation. I think, as far as I know, research, there's a lot of research going into prosody and intonation and stress and, you know, emotion, expressiveness. But as far as I know, I don't think it's getting anywhere very fast. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. Modeling that is the extra layer that really makes it sound natural, right? I think without that, it's always going to sound like a machine, which is maybe fine. I mean, whether it should sound like a person or not is a different question, more of a philosophical one. But yeah, without that extra layer, which I think it's proving really difficult to crack. That's the final frontier for speech tech.
Yeah. So there is space for research. So if you want to do a PhD, guys,
Yes.
that's the topic. Okay. So as our last question, Micaela, I would like you to, if possible, give us advice for individuals who are just starting out in computational linguistics or linguistics management, and how they can position themselves for the market.
So I have quite a few resources that I found very helpful, at least. And so one of them is very specific to text-to-speech, and it's a book called Text-to-Speech Synthesis, helpfully, written by Paul Taylor. And that is, for me, that was the best introduction to this field, if anyone is interested in going specifically into speech. But more broadly for NLP, there's a great book by Jurafsky and Martin called Speech and Language Processing, which is really kind of the seminal work on this topic. And I think more generally, my advice would just be to figure out what you're interested in. I think whether you want to go more into the kind of conversational experience chatbot arena, or the, you know, speech recognition area. I think there's so, like, it's so broad. Linguistics is so broad, you know, everything from phonetics all the way through to pragmatics. Like, I don't know anything about pragmatics, right? Like, it's the opposite of what I study and work in. So you know, I do think it's important to slightly narrow your area of focus, because you can't possibly know everything, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, you know, those LinkedIn learning courses, lots of great YouTube videos and playlists, just so much out there that I think you can get really overwhelmed. And so I think one piece of advice would definitely be to choose a focus, because you can end up kind of going through the wormhole hole and getting lost. I think that those would be my main pieces of advice.
Okay, great. Can you say the last bit of your advice? Because I think my screen froze a little bit.
Sure.
Can you hear me? And then what was the last bit of your advice?
So basically just so that you don't get overwhelmed, just to choose a particular area to focus on, with both within linguistics, but also, within the technology field, like, and again, like I said, do you want to focus on being more of a technical coder towards the engineering goal, or do you want to focus more on team management and program management like I do?
Great. So that's it for today, folks. Micaela, thank you very much. As I said before, you work in a more management-driven role, and it was a very new and important perspective for us in the podcast here. So thank you for that. I hope you like it. I hope you viewers like it as well. And thank you very much, Micaela, again.
Thank you, João. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. So that's it, folks. Bye-bye, and see you in the next episode.